Hello and welcome to the Long Shot Podcast. I am your host, Davis Reed, and I am once again here without my co-host as he remains locked in on trying to win a championship. I might be without my co-host, but I am never alone because I'm joined once again by Harry. Harry, what's going on?
I'm doing well, Davis. I'm happy to be here again. I got big shoes to fill, but I'm doing my best.
You're doing great. I'll tell you what, the reviews in the 2 episodes that you've been a part of have just been 5-star. And I think it has nothing to do with me. I think it has a lot to do with what you're bringing to the table. So I appreciate that. But here's the thing. This one's a short, punchy episode. We're going to keep it small but action-packed. Think of it like a Jose Alvarado episode, if you will. Just sort of get straight to some 3-point analysis that I did. This is maybe in the spirit of our podcast name, but I took a deep dive into the 3-point shot in the NBA this year because some funky stuff was going on. And I thought, I now have a platform where I can share this information with the world, which is such an honor, something I'm very fortunate to have. So I want to get to that. Before we do, I feel like maybe, Harry, I should offer a quick disclaimer. Just because I obviously have a bias towards 3-point shooting. I'm not gonna hide from that. I consider my co-host to be one of the greatest shooters who's ever lived. Watching him shoot a basketball is sort of like, do you remember that Japanese robot at the Olympics?
Yeah.
Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Watching Duncan shoot sort of gives me a little bit of that emotion. I remember when we were at Exeter. I think I've told this story. I might have told this story the first episode we ever did. Duncan and I were giving a little background on our friendship. And I remember the first open gym we had at Phillips Exeter back in 2012. We played basketball for an hour and a half, sort of an opportunity to get to know everybody. And then we were just sitting on the sidelines, undoing our shoes, getting ready to move on with the day. And Duncan stayed out there and he was just shooting. And someone was under the basket rebounding for him. And I swear the rebounder didn't move for 10 minutes. Just catch it out of the net, throw it back to him. And Duncan's at the top of the key just raining threes. And, we're 17, 18 years old at this point. And at that point, I had played some high-level basketball. I'd seen some good basketball players. But I distinctly remember that moment and having this thought of like, yeah, I've never seen anything like this before. It was robotic. It really was. I said that sarcastically, but actually that story, it was very robotic. I remember feeling like this looks like someone's playing a video game. Like it's the same thing over and over again. It was ridiculous. So anyway, this is all, the point of this is me saying the breakdown that I'm getting to here in this episode is about how 3-point production and efficiency took a major hit this year in the NBA. Any way you look at it, you can cut the data a couple different ways, but the numbers are down. And I'm a data guy. I worked in data analysis before I started this podcast. So I spend time on Basketball Reference combing through NBA data. That's not something I'm necessarily proud of. I should maybe find a better way to use my time, but it's something that I do. So the numbers jumped out to me. And again, I now have this platform where I can share this story with the people. So is it a defense of 3-point shooters? Yes and no, kind of, I guess. But either way, I think you guys will find it interesting. And, hopefully you can walk away from this saying, I learned something today. That's really the goal.
I've got a question for you. What is your 3-point shot looking like? Do you have a stroke?
It's not good anymore. It used to be pretty solid. It was sort of what I prided myself on. I was a 3-point line to 3-point line guy. Not that different from Duncan actually. Mm-hmm. Very rarely went into the lane. Like that was sort of forbidden territory. That was where like the big strong monsters lived. I was, defensively I didn't want to get down there, and on offense I had no business around the rim. So I was the point guard who threw passes to the better players and shot threes whenever I could. Now I don't play enough basketball where, shooting's one of those things that I actually we've referenced this guy around you a lot now because Duncan and I, one of our best friends is Harry, who's the assistant for the women here at Michigan. And the other day he texted me, he's like, hey, come to the gym, let's get a workout in. I was like, awesome, great. It's a huge luxury that I have somebody who can get me into the Michigan athletic facility and I can work out. It's awesome. And we get there and he's like, all right, our warm up is we have to make 50 NBA threes. And I haven't shot a basketball in 6 months. So I'm like, okay, that sounds awesome, but I have no idea how long this is going to take.
Yeah.
And he's a good basketball player. He been a good basketball player for a long time, and he still is playing a lot of basketball. So I have no shame saying that he has the upper hand on me in this exercise. So we're at opposite ends of the court, and we each have to make 50 threes. He ends up doing it, 50 NBA threes, mind you. He ends up doing it in like 7 minutes or something impressive. And I remember he's sort of an asshole. He's he's in my wedding. He's a groomsman, but he's one of my best friends in the world. But he wanted to let me know that he was a better shooter than me. And he even admitted this afterwards. Like he had never done it as quickly as he did it that day because there was the extra motivation. Yeah. So he did it in like 7 minutes, and he was counting them out loud because he just knew that I was behind him. And when he got to 50, I was at 25. So he did it twice as, he got there. I was only half so that was a shot to the ego. I ended up, it picked up momentum. My point of this story is it was really bad to start. It took me about 5 minutes to make 10 threes. It was bad. But then, it's like riding a bike. It starts to come back. So shooting is something I'll always have some pride in being able to do, but you do have to, grease the wheels every once in a while.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, this breakdown gets into some of the things I'm seeing in the NBA this year. How 3-point shooting is down. I mean, Steph Curry shot 38% from three this year, which is really all you need to know. He's the undisputed greatest shooter of all time. Never really even sniffed 40% in his career, and he's 38 this year. So there's some funky stuff going on with the 3-point shot, and I thought it deserved a deep dive. So we'll get to that. But before we get to that, I do have some miscellaneous playoff thoughts that, Harry, I just want to run by you because,
Please.
Again, I now have this platform where I can share my thoughts with the people. And especially now that Duncan's away, I think it gives us a little more room just to make this all about me. This is now my podcast, my show. I have random thoughts that I just think are maybe are not at all worth sharing. But I'm going to do it, and I would love if you have any thoughts on any of these, just what you think. So this is just throughout the week. I was just writing down miscellaneous thoughts that came to mind when watching basketball because I've watched more basketball this week than ever in my career, probably just because we're doing this podcast now, and so I feel like I need to be up to speed with everything going on in the NBA, and it's just been an awesome playoff. So as I'm watching games, I'm just writing down some thoughts, and the first one I have on this list here is Desmond Bane looks like the football player that's on every high school basketball team. And, it's the guy who's like a freak athlete, stronger than everybody else on the court. Not to mess with him. Doesn't really know how to move that well. And this is no longer a comparison to Desmond Bane, but just that football player doesn't really know how to move that well, but rebounds, sets vicious screens, will just barrel his way to the rim every once in a while, and everyone knows to get out of the way. If you just turned the sound off, wipe away jersey numbers and names, and just watched like 10 seconds of a Memphis Grizzlies game, and you happen to catch 10 seconds where Desmond Bane isn't shooting a three because he shot like 44% from three this year, I think you could be confused that maybe you were watching a high school basketball game and he was like the star linebacker.
Yeah.
So that jumped out to me.
That really does take me back to my time in Michigan, the 1 or 2 months every year where the football players would come to the CCRB out here at Michigan. I definitely, Bane's got a little bit more juice than that maybe.
No, he's a beast. I mean, again, so this is actually a little foreshadowing into my 3-point breakdown because I get to some Desmond Bane points, but he doesn't make it into the top 25 guys in attempts in the NBA this year, but he was shooting way better percentage-wise. He's right on the cusp, and he's shooting way better than everybody who's in that top 25 group. He shot like 43.5% from three this year on high volume, which is ridiculously good. I mean, I'd like to point out that my co-host was 45% on higher volume a couple years ago, but point being, Desmond Bane has had an unbelievable shooting year. So my second takeaway is that I'm seeing a lot of Nets slander on the timeline instead of Celtics credit. And so I just want to take a second to say the Celtics are terrifying. As somebody who's rooting for the Heat, wanting them to come out of the East, they scare me probably the most. And I get that it's fun to pile on KD, to pile on Ben Simmons, to pile on Kyrie, but I think it's getting a little out of hand. And especially the Ben stuff, by the way. I think bringing him back in the playoffs was always a terrible idea. I can't believe that he was even an option. This guy clearly hadn't played basketball in over a year. He was going through some mental stuff. To throw him into a playoff game for him to play his first basketball live action just seemed like it only really could have backfired. And it's piling a lot on a guy who's dealing with some stuff. So Nets slander's out of control. Celtics are really good. They scare me. And I think the narrative should be how impressive they are rather than how bad the Nets were. Because I still think the Nets beat a lot of teams in the East in that first round. They just happened to draw the Celtics, who are rolling right now.
No, and you talked earlier about using a platform. If there's one thing I have tried to do with this, sliver of platform I've been given by the long shot, it is to, say bad things about the city of Boston. So I might be, part of the problem, but I will say that the Celtics do have an interesting kind of way their team has come together. It's like the least sexy way, where it wasn't addition by addition or addition by subtraction. It was like addition by moving Marcus Smart to the point guard.
Yep.
Like it's like one of the. It seems like the most subtle shift that could actually result in like totally changing a team's identity. So I do think the Celtics have snuck up on people who don't realize how important having him as that defensive anchor at point guard.
100% agree. I also think if we could get, I don't want to foreshadow, you don't want to wish away series, or you don't want to, look past series. But if you could get a Miami Heat, Boston Celtics Eastern Conference Finals, that would just be a defensive bloodbath, an absolute defensive bloodbath. So I'm with you. I think you slandering the city of Boston is different than not giving their basketball team enough credit. So I'm going to let you off the hook.
Thank you.
On that front. Okay, my third takeaway. We'll go 5 takeaways. My third takeaway is I need to apologize to Devin Booker. Not that I know Devin Booker, and not that Devin Booker's going to hear this, but I might have done this on the podcast. I definitely did it off the podcast with Duncan. I told him that Devin Booker should not be in the MVP conversation, off the pure fact that I get that he's the best player on the best team. His numbers were awesome. I saw some stat that guys who have averaged 25, 5 and 5 on teams that won 65 plus games, or whatever the Suns did, 60 plus games, I think had always won MVP. There were only like a handful of other examples, and those guys all won MVP. I got that. But my argument was the Suns are so good, they're so deep, that they won most of their games without Devin Booker in the regular season. The most valuable player, I think, should go to a guy like Jokic or a guy like Embiid, who clearly are boosting their team above where they would be without them. And I didn't think Devin Booker was like that. I need to retract that statement because the Suns look human in round 1. And that's not to discount the Pelicans. They've been awesome. They played really well. But the Phoenix Suns should not be in a bloodbath with the New Orleans Pelicans. And a lot of that is because Devin Booker is not there. So I admit, I apologize, Devin Booker. You clearly are more important to the Phoenix Suns than I originally thought.
No, I'm with you. And it's he early in his career, the rap on him was like good stats, bad team or whatever. And it's funny how it seems to have switched now, where he's like the exact guy you want in a playoff series.
Right.
And his what he can do in ISO scoring against like really locked in playoff defense is just so incredible.
It's also the value of having people down the stretch who can score is the most important thing in the playoffs. And the other night you saw in game 5, Pelicans, Suns, Chris Paul is just huffing and puffing at halftime. And you're thinking, oh no, down the stretch, it's going to have to be Chris Paul. If he's tired, that's not good. And they ended up pulling out the win anyway. But to have two guys, and we talked about this during our awards, the Phoenix Suns, how clutch they are. And I believe we nominated Chris Paul, not Devin Booker, but Devin Booker could have easily been in that conversation as well because they're both elite down the stretch. Their clutch stats are amazing. So to have both those guys down the stretch is going to be incredibly valuable for the Suns, assuming they can get past the Pelicans, but who knows? I'm all on the Pelicans bandwagon, by the way. Okay, fourth takeaway. This is a short one. It's pretty simple. It's one I think you're going to like, Harry. Klay Thompson is so awesome. He's just the man. Continues to be my favorite player in the NBA, other than my co-host and the people that I know personally. I am just a fan. I'm a full-on fan, and he has been so amazing. I mean, he's been amazing. We talked about this on the podcast, but he's been amazing this year in general, just to come back from 2 injuries and look the way he's looked. But he's now in just elite form again. He's shooting 50% from 3 in the playoffs, averaging like 25 a game. It's just, I can't stress enough how happy it makes me to watch him play basketball.
No objections for me. He looks so good. He also is doing all the things he used to do. You know, maybe he's a little slow on defense, like, you know, a guy who ripped half of his ligaments apart over the last 2 years. Okay, he's a little slow on defense, but it's just the little ISO post ups he gets, the three. He looks so good. So listen,
I agree. All right, last takeaway. Got to get a Heat takeaway in here, and we touched on it with the Celtics, but their defense has looked impeccable. I heard this stat somewhere. Wish I could give credit to whoever I heard this from. But in the regular season, the Hawks had the second rated offensive rating in the NBA, just behind Utah. Offensive rating of like 115. In the playoffs, it was 102, which would have been the worst in the NBA in the regular season. And it's because the Heat have just absolutely shut them down. I mean, I think the Trae Young numbers are well documented. But again, similar to the net slander versus Celtics credit, I'm going to make the same argument here. I don't think this is an indictment on Trae. I tweeted this out yesterday, actually. I don't think his numbers are an indictment on him or that he choked or that he had a bad series. I think instead it's that the Heat were just incredible. And even in Game 5, no Jimmy, no Kyle Lowry, their defense was amazing. And Trae Young said after the game, he's like, it's a scheme. It's their team defensive scheme. They have great individual defenders, but it's not even about that. It's their scheme. If they want to take somebody out of a game, they can do that. So knock on wood, because next round, if they draw Philly, they're going to have to do that again. Hopefully they can, but it's fun to watch.
No, I'm with you. I pulled up a clip on Twitter to see if I could find those Trae stats, and instead I found just a clip of Trae dribbling the ball down, getting picked up by PJ Tucker, and then they run a screen, they switch off, and Bam's on him, and they run another switch, and Jimmy Butler's on him. It's like, well, yeah. What are you going to do?
What are you supposed to do? And by the way, the other guys have been great defensively too. I thought Duncan was awesome in Game 5 defensively. He came in and played awesome minutes on the defensive end. And those guys are so good at team defense, like their help defense. Again, it's not always just what's going on the ball, but it's the principles of being in the gaps, being in help, being in, taking away. It's just they've made it look masterful so far. So we'll see. Hopefully that can continue. And again, if we get a Miami Heat Boston Celtics Eastern Conference Finals, it's going to be like 60-60 with 3 minutes to go, because those teams they've been elite. All right, those are my playoff thoughts. I had some more, but I don't know if you guys want to hear them. My favorite one is that Desmond Bane looks like a high school football player. I was really I was bullish on that one.